Karen stole a car from an impound lot. She was tased after attacking an officer. The taser clicked twice before she hit the pavement, screaming that she was the president of this community and nobody could touch her. 3 months earlier, I never imagined Linda Prescott's name would end with handcuffs, a mugshot and a viral video watched 11 million times. My name is Claire Bennett. I bought my little brick house in Maple Hollow Estates because it looked peaceful, quiet, safe. I didn't know peace in that neighborhood came with a price tag, and Linda Prescott collected it in humiliation. She ran the HOA board like a queendom, and every resident learned quickly, cross her and you'd regret it. Maple Hollow had 32 rules about lawn height, mailbox color and holiday lights. Linda enforced them like scripture. I moved in with my daughter Sophie, 7 years old, still grieving her father, needing stability more than anything else. The welcome basket Linda left on my porch had a fruit bowl and a 7-page rulebook, highlighted in yellow marker. "We take pride in our standards here," she said, smiling with teeth too white to be real, eyes cold as glass. I smiled back, thanked her and told myself I'd keep my head down. That plan lasted exactly 17 days. Linda served on the board for 11 years, unopposed, because nobody wanted the headache of running against her. She controlled the newsletter, the violation letters, the community Facebook group and apparently the parking enforcement schedule too. Neighbors whispered about fines that appeared overnight, liens filed for nothing and appeals that vanished into paperwork purgatory. My neighbor Tom once got fined $400 for a garden gnome Linda called an unauthorized structure. Nobody fought back. Fighting Linda meant fighting the board, the management company and apparently half the county's paperwork system. I told myself it wouldn't happen to me. I was careful, quiet and paid my dues exactly on time. That confidence cracked the day Sophie's chalk drawings on our driveway earned us our first violation notice. Unauthorized surface markings, the letter read, must be pressure washed within 48 hours or incur a $150 penalty. I laughed at first. Then I saw Linda's SUV parked across the street, watching me read it through her windshield. That was the beginning. I just didn't know yet how far a woman with a laminated rulebook could go. 2 weeks later, my grass grew half an inch past regulation during a heat wave that killed half the block's lawns. Linda's letter arrived by certified mail this time, threatening a lien on my house if I didn't comply immediately. I called the office. The woman on the phone sighed and said, "Just do what she wants. It's easier." 024-foot, correction, I actually said nothing back, just stared at my phone, stunned that easier meant surrender. Meanwhile Sophie's bike, painted a cheerful purple, got flagged as non-compliant exterior decor visible from the street. I started keeping a folder. Every letter, every timestamp, every photo of Linda's own violations she conveniently never fined herself for. Her lawn ornaments, her unapproved shed, her dog off-leash daily, all untouched, all invisible to her own rulebook. A quiet contractor named Marcus, hired to fix my fence, warned me under his breath, "She'll ruin your life over nothing." "She did it to the Alvarez family," he said. "Forced a foreclosure over unpaid HOA fines under $1,000. I didn't believe him completely. Not yet. But something cold settled in my stomach that never quite left. The mailbox incident happened on a Tuesday. Linda claimed my new mailbox color violated colonial cream, though I matched the sample exactly. She fined me $200, then posted photos of my house in the community Facebook group, captioned, "Shameful." Neighbors I'd never spoken to suddenly knew my name, my daughter's name and my reckless disregard for community standards. I messaged her privately, asking for a paint match reconsideration. She replied only with a screenshot of Rule 14, Section C. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Sophie's face when she asked why the neighbors were staring at us. I started recording every interaction. Every phone call. Every knock at the door. I didn't know why yet, just instinct. Then Linda escalated. She demanded I remove Sophie's small trampoline, calling it a liability and an eyesore, within 5 days. The trampoline had been up for a year. Suddenly, it was a crisis worth a certified letter and a fine. I found out later she'd been the one who reported it, anonymously, of course, through the resident concern hotline. Anonymous complaints, I learned, almost always traced back to one phone number, Linda's personal cell, unlisted but not untraceable. A retired IT technician 2 doors down, Walter, quietly showed me how HOA portals log complaint metadata if you know where to look. I've watched her do this for years, he said. Nobody ever proves it. But the pattern never lies. I began cross-referencing complaint timestamps with Linda's own calendar, which she foolishly kept public on the community app. Every single, anonymous, complaint against me landed within 10 minutes of an entry marked simply, HOA business. My case folder grew thick. Photos, screenshots, timestamps, a spreadsheet I built at midnight while Sophie slept down the hall. Still, I said nothing publicly. I smiled at board meetings. I paid every unfair fine. I was building something quieter. Linda mistook my silence for surrender. She grew bolder, sloppier, convinced no one would ever challenge her authority. She started fining 3 other families the same week, the Nguyen's, the Okafors and old Mr. Patterson, who was 81. Mr. Patterson's crime, a wheelchair ramp Linda called unsightly, built after his stroke, required by his own doctor's orders. That was the moment something in me shifted from quiet resentment into something sharper, colder, more deliberate. I invited Mr. Patterson, the Nguyen's, and Walter over for coffee. We compared notes. The pattern was undeniable, documented, damning. She's been doing this for years, Mrs. Nguyen said. We just never had proof all in one place before. I proposed something risky. We file a joint complaint with the state HOA regulatory office, backed by real evidence. Linda had no idea 5 quiet neighbors were building a case file thicker than her own violation history. That week, Linda held an emergency board meeting, accusing certain residents of spreading malicious rumors about her leadership. She looked directly at me when she said it. I kept my face neutral, my phone recording under the table. After the meeting, she cornered me in the parking lot. You should be careful, she said, about who you trust. I asked what she meant. She smiled, said nothing else and walked to her SUV like a queen dismissing a servant. That night I filed our complaint with the state regulator, attaching 7 months of documented, time-stamped, pattern-matched harassment. Linda didn't know it yet, but the quiet resident she dismissed had just lit the fuse on her own downfall. 2 weeks passed with silence from the regulator, the kind of silence that makes you question if you did enough. Then Linda escalated dramatically. She called a special assessment, a $5,000 emergency fee for a fence repair nobody requested. The fence in question ran along her own backyard. Somehow every homeowner had to pay for it equally. Residents gathered furious signatures, but board bylaws let Linda approve emergency assessments alone if she deemed them urgent. I dug through the county records office and found something strange. The fence contractor was Linda's brother-in-law's company. Suddenly the $5,000 emergency made sense. It wasn't repairs. It was a family payday disguised as HOA business. I photographed the contractor's paperwork, cross-referenced the LLC registration and found Linda listed as a silent co-owner. That was conflict of interest, plain and documented, the kind that gets HOA board members legally removed. I brought this to Walter and the others. Mr. Patterson's hands shook as he read the LLC filing twice. She's been stealing from us, he whispered, hiding behind rulebooks while robbing the people she's supposed to protect. We compiled everything into a formal ethics complaint, filed with both the state regulator and the HOA's own management company. Linda, unaware, threw a community excellence gala that week, celebrating her own leadership with catered food and a slideshow. She stood at the podium, praising herself for protecting property values, while our complaint sat unopened in a regulator's inbox. I sat in the back row, clapping politely, watching her bask in applause she hadn't earned honestly. After the gala, she approached me, suspiciously friendly. You've been quiet lately, Claire. I appreciate residents who understand the rules. I smiled and said nothing. Inside, I was counting the days until the regulator's response finally arrived. It came on a Thursday. The state ordered a formal audit of Maple Hollow's HOA finances within 30 days. Linda received the notice publicly, at a board meeting, in front of every resident she'd ever humiliated. Her face went pale, then red, then she laughed nervously, calling it a clerical misunderstanding, nothing more. But the auditors weren't looking for misunderstandings. They were looking for a paper trail, and paper trails don't lie. Within a week, 3 more families came forward with their own stories of unfair fines and mysterious, emergency fees. One family had nearly lost their home to a lien over an $800 fine that ballooned with processing costs. Linda tried damage control, posting a community update calling the audit routine and nothing residents should worry about. Nobody believed her anymore. The mask was slipping and everyone could see the cracks underneath the veneer. The property management company itself filed a complaint against Linda, distancing themselves entirely. Turns out she'd been pressuring their staff to approve fines without proper review, threatening to fire the company otherwise. An employee named Priya, terrified of retaliation, agreed to speak anonymously to the auditors about Linda's behavior. Priya's statement detailed how Linda personally selected which anonymous complaints got fast-tracked and which got buried entirely. The audit expanded. What started as a fence investigation became a full review of Linda's 11 years on the board. I felt something close to relief for the first time in months, though I knew Linda wouldn't go down quietly. She requested an emergency board vote to restructure oversight, conveniently giving herself more control during the audit's chaos. The vote failed, 3-2, the first time in years the board hadn't rubber-stamped whatever she wanted. Furious, she accused the dissenting board members of colluding with outside agitators, meaning me, though she never said my name. That week, someone slashed my car tires overnight. No proof it was her, but the timing felt anything but coincidental. I filed a police report anyway, adding it quietly to my growing folder, another data point in a pattern of intimidation. Sophie asked why our car looked sad in the driveway. I told her it was just a flat tire, nothing more. I didn't want her to know how ugly grown adults could get over lawn ornaments and parking spaces. Walter suggested we bring our case to local news. Sunlight, he said, is the only thing people like her fear. I hesitated. Publicity meant exposure, meant Linda might retaliate harder before the audit even finished its slow crawl. But Mr. Patterson, frail and furious, said something that changed my mind completely. I'm 81. I have nothing left to lose. We reached out to a local investigative reporter named Jenna Ruiz, who'd covered HOA corruption cases before, successfully. Jenna reviewed our folder for 2 hours, then looked up and said, "This isn't a story. This is a lawsuit." She agreed to run a preliminary piece, careful and factual, timed to publish right after the audit's findings dropped. Linda, sensing the walls closing in, tried a new tactic. She offered me a resolution, waiving all my fines quietly. I refused. This was never about my fines anymore. It was about Mr. Patterson's ramp and 11 years of silence. She grew desperate, cornering board members individually, promising favors, threatening consequences, trying to buy loyalty before the storm hit. One board member, Diane, finally broke and told me Linda had asked her to lose some financial documents before the audit. Diane refused, terrified of jail time, and instead handed me copies of everything Linda wanted destroyed. Among those documents, proof Linda had been paying herself a consulting fee from HOA funds for 3 straight years. $11,000, quietly withdrawn under a vague line item labeled administrative services, never approved by any vote. I nearly dropped my coffee reading it. This wasn't just power abuse anymore. This was outright embezzlement, plain and provable. We handed everything to the auditors and to Jenna Ruiz, who now had enough for more than a preliminary piece. The audit report, when it finally arrived, ran 43 pages, and every page confirmed what we already suspected. Improper fines, conflict of interest contracts, unapproved withdrawals, and a pattern of selectively enforced rules stretching back over a decade. The state regulator recommended immediate removal proceedings against Linda Prescott, effective as soon as the board could convene. Linda, informed by certified mail, the same method she'd weaponized against us for years, went eerily quiet. For 3 days, nobody saw her. Her SUV sat parked. Her curtains stayed drawn. The silence felt heavier than her screaming ever had. Then Jenna's article dropped, The Queen of Maple Hollow, How One HOA President Allegedly Stole from Her Own Neighbors. By morning, it had thousands of shares. By afternoon, local news vans parked outside our quiet cul-de-sac. I stood at my window, watching reporters gather near Linda's house and felt something unfamiliar rising in my chest, hope. The removal hearing was scheduled for the following Monday, open to all residents, held in the community clubhouse. Linda hired a lawyer, a sharp-suited man who insisted the audit was flawed and the evidence circumstantial at best. I brought my folder anyway, printed, organized, tabbed by date, ready for whatever circumstantial meant to a room full of neighbors. The clubhouse filled beyond capacity. People stood in the back, spilled onto the porch, phones raised to record everything. Linda entered last, chin high, dressed sharply, acting like a woman attending her own coronation rather than her downfall. She spoke first, calling the entire process a witch hunt orchestrated by disgruntled residents who never understood community leadership. Then the auditor spoke, calmly reading numbers that needed no embellishment, $11,000, 3 years, 0 approvals. Linda's lawyer objected repeatedly. The board's attorney reminded everyone the audit was independently conducted by state-appointed accountants, not neighbors. Mr. Patterson stood, cane trembling, and read his own statement about the ramp, his stroke and 11 months of fines. You could hear a pin drop. Even Linda's lawyer looked uncomfortable, glancing sideways at his increasingly rigid client. I spoke next, laying out the pattern, anonymous complaints traced to her calendar, the fence contractor, the silent LLC ownership. Linda interrupted, shouting that I was obsessed, that I'd targeted her from day one out of some petty grudge. I moved in wanting quiet, I said. You made it impossible. This isn't a grudge. It's just the truth. The room applauded. Linda's face twisted, and for the first time, I saw real panic behind her composed mask. The board called for a vote on immediate removal. Even her 2 remaining allies hesitated under the weight of evidence. 4-1. Linda Prescott was removed as HOA president, effective immediately, pending further legal review of embezzlement charges. She stood, knocking her chair backward, and screamed that she'd built this community, and we'd regret this humiliation. Security, hired for the event after threats online, gently guided her toward the exit as cameras captured everything. That should have been the end. It wasn't. Linda Prescott did not go quietly into any good night. 3 days later, she filed a lawsuit against the HOA board, claiming wrongful termination and defamation of character. Her lawyer argued the audit lacked proper procedural authority, a stalling tactic meant to freeze the embezzlement case entirely. Meanwhile, Linda began a smear campaign online, posting long rants accusing me of orchestrating a coordinated harassment ring. She created fake accounts, I later learned, to comment on Jenna's article, calling it biased tabloid trash. One night, my doorbell camera caught her walking past my house 4 times in 20 minutes, staring at the windows. I filed for a restraining order the next morning, attaching the footage alongside my growing folder of documented incidents. The judge granted a temporary order, keeping Linda 200 feet from my property, effective within 24 hours. She violated it within a week, parking directly across the street, claiming she was simply visiting an old friend. Police were called. She was cited, not arrested, a slap on the wrist that only seemed to embolden her further. Then came a twist I never saw coming. The embezzlement investigation uncovered a second, larger fund Linda had access to. A community reserve fund meant for roof repairs and emergency infrastructure, quietly drained over 6 years, not 3. $41,000, gone, funneled through vague invoices to companies that traced back to relatives and old friends. The state moved from civil audit findings to a formal criminal referral, involving the county district attorney's office directly. Linda's lawyer dropped her the same week, citing irreconcilable differences, legal speak for realizing he'd backed a losing case. Desperate, she showed up uninvited to the next community meeting, demanding to address residents one last time as their leader. The interim board president, Diane, calmly told her she no longer had standing to speak and asked her to leave. Linda refused, raising her voice, insisting she'd sacrificed everything for a neighborhood that never appreciated real leadership. Someone in the crowd shouted, "You stole $41,000 from our roofs." The room erupted into furious agreement. Security escorted her out again, this time to jeers instead of stunned silence, a humiliation entirely of her own making. That night, Jenna Ruiz published a follow-up, HOA Karens alleged theft nearly doubles, reserve fund investigation deepens. The story went national. Morning shows picked it up. Strangers online began calling her simply, the Maple Hollow Karen. I hated the nickname a little, honestly. It flattened a real, calculated pattern of theft into an internet punchline. But it also meant scrutiny, and scrutiny meant investigators worked faster, unwilling to let a viral case go cold. 2 detectives visited my house, asking careful questions about the folder, the timestamps, the pattern I'd tracked for months. I handed over everything, relieved to finally let professionals carry weight I'd been shouldering alone for far too long. They confirmed what we suspected. Linda's brother-in-law's fence company had invoiced the HOA for repairs that never actually happened. Ghost invoices, they called it. Paid work with no proof of labor, materials, or even a single receipt for lumber. The criminal case expanded to include fraud charges alongside embezzlement, carrying real prison time if she was convicted. Linda, still defiant, gave an interview to a small local channel, insisting she was a scapegoat for jealous neighbors. The interviewer, to her credit, asked directly about the $41,000. Linda's answer dissolved into stammering non-answers. That clip went viral too, clipped and captioned across social media, HOA Karen can't explain missing roof money. Meanwhile, the restraining order violation case moved forward. Linda faced a court date for that alone, separate from the fraud charges. I braced myself for another confrontation. I didn't yet know the confrontation would come somewhere I never expected, an impound lot. Linda's SUV had been seized as part of the fraud investigation, evidence in tracing payments to the ghost contractor. She was, understandably, furious about losing her car. She was not, understandably, entitled to simply take it back herself. 3 weeks after the seizure, security footage showed Linda climbing the impound lot fence at 11 at night. She hotwired her own vehicle, apparently a skill she'd learned from a boyfriend decades earlier, and drove straight for the gate. An off-duty officer, working lot security, tried to stop her. She accelerated instead of stopping, clipping his leg against the gate. Backup arrived within minutes. Linda, cornered, abandoned the car and tried to run across the impound lot on foot. She didn't get far. When an officer grabbed her arm, she swung wildly, connecting with his jaw before he subdued her. That's when the taser fired, twice, and Linda Prescott hit the pavement screaming about being the president of this community. The body cam footage leaked within hours, exactly as I'd seen replayed 100 times before this story even began. You don't understand who I am, she screamed at the officer, still handcuffed, mascara streaked down her furious face. I built this neighborhood, she shouted, though records now showed she'd built little beyond a decade of quiet theft. The clip hit social media by morning. HOA Karen steals own impounded car, tossed after attacking officer. It spread faster than the fraud story, faster than the embezzlement, faster than anything in Maple Hollow's quiet history. Millions of views within 2 days. News anchors debated it on morning television, calling it the perfect ending to a Karen saga. I felt strange watching it. Not triumphant, exactly. Just tired and a little sad it had come to violence at all. Sophie asked why the lady on TV looked like our old neighbor. I told her some grown-ups make very bad choices. Linda now faced charges stacking higher than anyone imagined: fraud, embezzlement, assault on an officer, resisting arrest, grand theft auto. Her bail hearing set conditions no one expected her to accept: no contact with Maple Hollow residents, electronic monitoring, surrendered passport. The twist came during her bail hearing, when her own daughter, estranged for years, appeared to testify against her. She stole from her own family too, her daughter said quietly. College funds. Grandma's inheritance. Everything, always, for years. The courtroom went silent. Even Linda, usually so composed under scrutiny, looked genuinely broken for the very first time. It turned out her pattern of taking things that weren't hers didn't begin with an HOA. It began long before. Her daughter explained Linda had drained a college fund meant for her, forging signatures on withdrawal forms years earlier. That was the twist nobody in Maple Hollow ever suspected. Linda's need for control started as a much older wound. Not an excuse, never an excuse, but an explanation for a woman who mistook power for safety, always. The judge denied bail modifications, citing flight risk given the passport surrender request and the pattern of prior deception. Linda would await trial in custody, a stunning fall for a woman who once controlled an entire neighborhood's mailbox colors. Meanwhile, the civil lawsuit she'd filed against the HOA board collapsed entirely, dismissed once the criminal charges became public record. Her own lawyer, the second one she'd hired, quietly withdrew again, unwilling to attach his name to the mess. Diane, now permanent HOA president, called an emergency meeting to address the situation everyone already knew from the news. "We're implementing new oversight rules," Diane announced. "No single board member controls fines, fees, or vendor contracts alone again." Residents applauded, exhausted but relieved, finally allowed a version of the community they'd wanted since moving in years ago. I sat in the third row, Sophie's hand in mine, watching a neighborhood slowly remember what fairness actually felt like. Mr. Patterson's ramp fines were formally reversed, along with every unjust fee Linda had issued during her 11-year reign. Penguins got their money back. Tom got his gnome fine refunded, with a small apologetic note attached. My own fines disappeared from the record entirely, though nothing could refund the sleepless nights or the slashed tires. Jenna Ruiz's final article in the series won a small regional journalism award, crediting persistent, documented resident advocacy. She thanked me by name. I hadn't expected that. I hadn't done any of it for recognition, only for fairness. The trial, months later, moved quickly once evidence piled against her, $41,000 in fraud, plus assault, plus theft. Her defense tried an insanity angle briefly, dismissed once psychiatric evaluators found her fully, calculatingly, coldly aware of her actions. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on every count the prosecution had charged. Linda Prescott was sentenced to 7 years in state prison, with restitution ordered for every dollar she'd stolen. She showed no remorse at sentencing, only muttering that nobody appreciated real leadership as bailiffs led her away. I watched from the gallery, feeling something quieter than victory. Just relief. Just the exhale of a year finally over. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked how I felt. I said simply, I feel like my neighborhood can breathe again. That clip made the evening news too, a calmer bookend to the chaos that had defined Maple Hollow for months. Sophie's trampoline stayed up through the following summer, purple and battered and completely, gloriously unbothered by anyone's rulebook. Walter started a small resident newsletter, transparent and boring in the best possible way, just facts, no fear. Mr. Patterson passed away peacefully the following spring, his ramp still standing, his dignity finally, fully restored before he went. I still think about him sometimes, how a wheelchair ramp became the tipping point in a story none of us chose. The HOA board instituted term limits after everything settled, no more than 4 years, with mandatory financial audits yearly. Diane, still president, jokes sometimes that Maple Hollow will never let one person hold that much unchecked power again. I believe her. I watch the meetings now, quieter, fairer, boring in exactly the way a neighborhood should be. Sometimes strangers recognize my name from Jenna's articles, ask if I ever expected it to end with handcuffs and a taser. I always say the same thing, I expected justice, eventually. I just didn't expect it to look quite that dramatic. Linda's daughter reached out once, months later, thanking me quietly for something she said she'd needed for years, an ending. She was never going to stop on her own, she told me. Someone had to make her stop. I think about that a lot. Not everyone gets to be the one who makes the stopping happen. I did. It cost me sleep, a set of tires, months of anxiety and every ounce of my old, naive patience. But it also gave me something I didn't expect, a neighborhood full of people who finally trusted each other again. Sophie plays with Penguin kids now, chalk drawings covering 3 driveways, nobody rushing out with a rulebook anymore. Sometimes I drive past the old Impound lot and think about that grainy footage, a queen finally losing her crown. Power like Linda's always looks invincible from the outside, until someone quietly starts keeping a folder of receipts. I never set out to be anyone's hero. I just wanted my daughter to draw with chalk in peace. Funny how the smallest injustices, ignored long enough, build into the loudest, most public collapses imaginable. Maple Hollow healed slowly, the way real neighborhoods do, through boring meetings and honest audits and shared relief. Linda Prescott remains in prison today, a cautionary tale residents mention half-joking at every new HOA meeting since. As for me, I finally got the quiet life I moved here for, just, notably, the hard way.